Hello, welcome back. So every now and then I read a string of books that I don't really like very much and I have trouble talking about. I've just come off like a 40-minute discussion about these books and realized that it just didn't come out well. And it's because I really didn't enjoy these books very much. And going in depth about them, just I wasn't doing a very good job of it because I just didn't care for the books very much. And so I thought that I would do this over and just give a little description of the book and maybe why I didn't like it or why I didn't connect with it. And we'll just see if that works out better. So the first one I read was Such Men Are Dangerous by Lawrence Block. And I just didn't like this. Like I said, this is about a man who was a commando in Vietnam for 10 years and he tried to get a job with the CIA and they rejected him from that job. And the agent that interviewed him comes down to this island where he has moved in Key West, where he lives all by himself and he only leaves every 2 weeks to get supplies. And this agent spins him the story of how they are going to be moving these dirty weapons, basically these little bitty nuclear bombs that are like not grenades, but they're like mortar grenades and all these other like biological weapons and that sort of thing in this convoy. And there are some like terrorists from South America who are going to steal these weapons. And the commando is like, whatever you say, he doesn't trust this guy. He drowns him in the ocean until he is dead. And then he revives him. And then the guy tells him the true story. And that is just that this agent sees this opportunity to steal these weapons himself and sell them to the good guys and make a lot of money, and that he has come down to recruit this guy for the job and they're going to make a lot of money together. And they go off and they infiltrate this base using false identities and they steal these weapons. And there's like several double crosses in this book. And I just didn't like this. I just didn't connect with it at all because the the main character is completely ruthless. He has no real conscience besides what works for him. Like, I suppose he is a psychopath. He was just completely unlikable. The agent he was working with was completely unlikable, a complete liar. And I didn't understand the point of the book because, I mean, this guy, he says that all he wants is to live on his island and be alone and not be bothered and get away from the world, and that he absolutely hates the CIA agent and that he hates this whole job. And so I didn't understand why he took the job. And if he didn't want the guy on his island, I mean, he drowned him. He killed him. He could have just left him dead. But instead, we get this whole plot about stealing these weapons and selling them to these people. And there's double crosses, like I said. And I felt like the ending of this book completely nullified everything that happens in this book, just completely. And I mean, it could be said in the end that what the guy did actually turned out to be a good thing because of the way that the plot develops, which I don't really want to give it away, but I still really, I just didn't like it. I didn't connect with the main character at all. And he just, like I said, he was not likable. I felt zero empathy for him. I felt zero interest in this plot because he was basically a non-entity. Like he just existed and was very robotic. I don't know. I didn't like it. Okay, so after that, I read The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. And this is about four men from the Blackfeet tribe who, when they are in their teens, maybe their early 20s, they go hunting in a part of the reservation that is, it's not like sacred or anything, but it's reserved for the elders of the tribe. And young men can hunt there, but they have to hike in. So it's like a whole day's thing to get into this area if you're hiking. Whereas it's only like a 2 or 3 hour journey by truck. So they drive in and they just see this herd of elk. They come over a hill and see this herd of elk and they start shooting all these elk. And as they are skinning them, there is one elk that is still alive, and one of these men has to shoot it repeatedly to kill it. And it has different eyes, like it has very different eyes from a regular elk. And it's a very young elk, and she's pregnant. And she shouldn't be pregnant this time of year, and she shouldn't be pregnant because she's too young. And this comes to haunt these men in the years following. So we catch up with them about 10 years later. One of the men has already been killed, and we know it's because of the elk spirit. Like these other men don't know that because he had been working off in another state. And so there are really three different stories going on in this, although two of the stories are together. And so one of the men has married a white woman and moved away from the reservation, and he is working at a post office. Things start happening in his life where he realizes that he is being hounded by this elk spirit in different ways, and he starts to question whether or not his wife is this elk spirit, whether one of his coworkers is an elk spirit, and he starts to really like descend into what we see as like a psychotic episode where he can't trust anything. He's very paranoid, and we're not really sure of what's going on, whether it's in his head or whether it's real. And I thought that this first or the second story actually it's very extreme. Like it goes from 0 to 100 very fast, and it's like this man has had this complete psychotic breakdown. And I don't think that the ending of his story, like what he does to combat this elk spirit, is justified by the actual plot. So it just makes him very unlikable actually, because although we feel for him in the beginning where he's being hounded by this elk spirit or by his psychosis, like he takes some actions that in light of the text itself, I don't think were justified. Like I don't think it had come to a point where what he does is justified. And so he just seems insane. Now, in the other two men's stories, uh, I liked them much better because this elk spirit, we get into the elk spirit's head and what it is thinking and what it's doing, what she is doing, and how she is going to go about this revenge. And that's another thing, like when we go from not being inside this elk spirit's mind to being inside the elk spirit's mind halfway through the book, that was a little bit jarring. uh, because it sets a different tone, I think, between like psychotic breakdown to, oh yeah, this is real and this is really happening. And there was a really weird scene in the end of this book with that comes down to a one-on-one basketball match, which was really odd and out of the blue, and I didn't think made a lot of sense. And overall, I just felt like the whole plot was kind of muddy. Like, and I think maybe that was on purpose because these four men are, they don't really fit into like the traditions of their culture. They don't really fit into society as a whole, like American society as a whole. There's still a lot of racism against them. They don't know where they fit into the world, and their tribe, like in their culture, they have no. They say themselves that they have no tradition of an elk woman spirit, right? Like an elk spirit. So they don't understand what is going on even. And so they're really questioning their own sanity, and they don't know what's going on, and they don't know how to stop it. And I think maybe that was on purpose. I think Stephen Graham Jones was doing that on purpose to sort of show how their identities are really fragmented. But I also just didn't really care for Stephen Graham Jones' writing style. Like, this is the second book of his that I've read, so I also read Mapping the Interior quite a while, probably 10 years ago, and it just didn't work for me either. I was very confused by what was going on in that book, and in a lot of ways I was confused by what was going on in this book. But I'd still like to read more books by Stephen Graham Jones. I wonder if there is. I will say that this felt very cinematic. I think that's one thing that threw me is that this felt like it was written. It didn't feel exactly like a novelization of a movie, but it felt like a book that was written to appeal to an audience who has been to a lot of movies, seen a lot of movies, because it felt a lot like an independent horror movie, right? That's kind of what it felt like watching an independent horror movie on Netflix or Hulu or something. And I don't really care for a lot of those horror movies in that style now. I very much like older horror movies. Um, I don't know. I just didn't connect with it. And I would love to talk about like why those newer movies just don't do it for me. But I mean, this is not a movie channel. And so the last book I'm going to talk about is Inside the White House by Ronald Kessler. And this started out pretty interesting. Like, I had no idea who Ronald Kessler was. Like, I didn't look this person up before I read this book, and I probably should have. I could have saved myself the trouble. So it starts out as just like this behind the scenes look at the presidential lives, like their families and the White House, like staff, like the long term White House staff, the butlers and the cooks and that sort of thing. And that was interesting because he'll be like, George H.W. Bush really liked to have yogurt with grape nuts for breakfast. And Richard Nixon really liked to eat cottage cheese with a pineapple ring for lunch. And here's the shenanigans that like the butlers get up to when people are out of town, like parties in the basement and then charging people to stay in these rooms overnight and trying to garner influence with the first family and this fight in the main kitchen there between these cooks, and that was interesting. So that was the stuff that I was reading the book for, just to get like a look at what it's like to live there, what it's like to work there, what Harry Truman liked to do, what Gerald Ford liked to do, what was their family life like, what was Barbara Bush really like. That was all interesting. That's why I started reading this book. But it slowly began to dawn on me that the presidents that Kessler liked, he was being very kind to. And the presidents that he didn't like, he was starting to tear apart. And starting to call them like amateurish and rubes and stuff like that. And so halfway through this book, so this was written in 1996, so this came out before the Lewinsky scandal and the impeachment and all that of Bill Clinton. He just tears into the Clintons for the last half of this book. And so it was like a bait and switch sort of thing, where it starts out as a kind of fun, gossipy look at, the White House and the president and first ladies and everything like that. And then it just turns into Clinton bashing. And I don't mean bashing Clinton for like the big scandals he was involved in, things that he deserved to be criticized for, as Christopher Hitchens would later do in his book, No One Left to Lie to. And I'm not trying to talk politics here. I'm not even going to mention my politics. It has nothing to do with it. What I'm saying is that this is an incredibly petty, hate-filled book about how awful Bill Clinton is and how much Ronald Kessler dislikes Bill Clinton. And so he is just picking apart everything that Clinton does, from what time he wakes up, to what time he goes to bed, to what he likes to eat, to what he doesn't like to eat, to how they can't even get their own kitchen to serve them the food they want, to how bad of a person Hillary Clinton is because she once screamed at a sheriff's deputy, and this fight that they had. And it was just tremendously petty. And I'm not saying that they don't deserve to be criticized, but this was just, like I said, it was just hate-filled pettiness on Ronald Kessler's part, and it was a complete bait and switch. It was just, yeah, this is a fun book. This is a fun look at these presidents' lives. And then, oh, by the way, did I tell you how much I hate the Clintons and how much I hope they don't get reelected, and how everything that they do all day long is terrible? How they're awful people and they're amateurish and they don't know what they're doing and they have no way, they don't know where they're going with their whatever it's called, whatever their mission is. They don't need to be reelected, and they suck, and here's every reason that they suck, and not even the big reasons, just Bill Clinton likes fried food and that makes him a terrible person. I don't know. It was just bad. I regret reading that book. So that is what I have been reading. I don't know how coherent this video will be. I have been trying to make this video for an hour now. And, and I don't know why it was so hard for me to talk about those three books. Like I said, probably because I didn't like them. And in the case of The Only Good Indians, I didn't want to give away too much, because I feel like, although that's a book I didn't personally like, I feel like other people might really like it. And I was trying not to give away too much of the plot. And since I don't script these videos, I oftentimes find myself rambling and messing up and everything like that. So we're just going to have to see how this came out. And so I want to thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.